Commander Park Ji-ho stood on the bridge of the huge battleship called Terra's Wrath, watching space fold and twist around them. The hyperspace tunnel was closing behind the human fleet, and suddenly 300 ships appeared in the dark space, near the Vegan system. Their hulls were made of special metal that changed colors like water moving in sunlight. The Galactic Empire had never seen ships like these before. The human fleet spread out in perfect formation like a deadly dance. Each ship moved exactly where it was supposed to go without any mistakes. Admiral Lee Hanna was in charge of everything from the biggest ship called Retribution. She pressed a button, and her voice went to every human ship in the fleet. Her words were cold and full of anger. The Empire had done something very bad. They had destroyed Earth's colony on New Busan and killed 2 million innocent people, including her younger brother, who was only 20 years old. For 20 long years, humanity had been getting ready for this day. They had built new weapons and new ships. They had trained their best soldiers and their smartest scientists. Everything was for this moment when they would make the Empire pay for what they did. The Empire thought humans were weak and stupid, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Kim Dae-ho was working on an Imperial Navy ship called Star Crusher when his computers started making loud warning sounds. Something big was happening in space, near their patrol area. His sensors were showing ships that looked old and simple, but something about them made him feel scared, deep in his stomach. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had destroyed many planets and killed billions of people from different species. These new ships should not be a problem, but when Kim Dae-ho looked at his screen more carefully, he saw something that made his hands shake. The human ships were moving in ways that should be impossible. Their energy readings were strange, and his computers could not understand what they were seeing. The Empire's best technology could not figure out how these ships worked. This was not supposed to happen. On the human flagship, engineer Choi Min-ho was watching the quantum processors that powered their amazing ship. These machines were humming with energy deep under the deck where no one could see them. 20 years ago, humans had captured some Imperial ships and spent all this time learning how their technology worked. Then they made it much better. The Empire thought they were the smartest species in the galaxy, but humans had become much smarter. The Imperial ships started moving closer to the human fleet. They moved in the same patterns they always used because the Empire never changed their tactics. They had won so many battles the same way that they thought it would always work. Admiral Krentak was in charge of the Imperial fleet from his huge ship called Eternal Dominion. He had destroyed more than 100 worlds and killed more people than anyone could count. He looked at the human ships and smiled because he thought this would be easy. The humans were ready for this. They had studied every Imperial battle for 20 years. They knew exactly how the Empire would attack, and they had prepared for it. The Imperial fleet formed a circle around the human ships, just like Admiral Lee Hanna knew they would. This was going to be the Empire's biggest mistake, Lieutenant. Yoon Soo-jin was watching her computer screen on the human destroyer called Vengeance. She could see every Imperial ship and knew exactly what they were going to do. The Empire always did the same thing when they found enemy ships. They would surround them and then attack with all their weapons at the same time. They thought this would scare their enemies and make them surrender quickly. But the humans were not scared at all. They had better shields and better weapons and better everything. The Empire was about to learn that there were scarier things in the galaxy than them. The human fleet waited patiently while the Imperial ships got into position. Every human captain and every human soldier knew this was the moment they had been waiting for their whole lives. The space between the two fleets was completely quiet. There were no sounds in space, but inside every ship, people were getting ready for battle. The Empire's soldiers were confident because they had never lost a big battle. The human soldiers were confident because they knew their technology was much better. The first shots had not been fired yet, but everyone knew that when the fighting started, everything in the galaxy was going to change forever. The battle began when Imperial Admiral Krentak gave the order to attack, his voice booming through every Imperial ship. The flagship Eternal Dominion had weapons that could crack planets in half, and shields that could stop almost any attack. Had used this ship to destroy so many worlds that he stopped counting after 50. The Admiral looked at the human ships and thought they would be destroyed in seconds. The Imperial fleet fired all their weapons at the same time. Thousands of energy, beams and plasma bolts flew through space toward the human ships. The attack was so powerful that it could have destroyed a small moon. The energy weapons glowed bright blue and purple as they crossed the darkness of space. This was the same attack that had destroyed hundreds of other fleets. Lieutenant Yoon Sujin watched her screens on the human destroyer Vengeance as the Imperial attack came toward them. She was not worried at all, because she knew something the Empire did not know. The human ships had adaptive shields that could learn from any attack. When the Imperial weapons hit the human ships, something amazing happened. The energy from the Imperial weapons did not destroy the human ships. Instead, the shields absorbed all the energy and turned it into power for the human ships. It was like the Imperial attack had made the human ships stronger instead of weaker. The Empire's most powerful weapons had done absolutely nothing to the human fleet. Admiral Krentok stared at his screens and could not believe what he was seeing. His weapons had hit the human ships directly, but they were completely undamaged. This was impossible. No ship could survive that kind of attack. The Admiral had been fighting battles for 300 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Captain Song Hyok was in command of the human battlecruiser called Retribution's Edge. He waited for the Imperial attack to finish, and then he smiled. It was time to show the Empire what real weapons could do. He pressed a button and spoke into his communication system. The words every human captain had been waiting to hear came out of his mouth. Return fire. The human ships fired their weapons, and something incredible happened. Their energy beams were not blue or purple like Imperial weapons. They were bright white, and they moved faster than anything the Empire had ever seen. When the human weapons hit the Imperial ships, they went right through the shields, like they were not even there. The Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion was hit by 3 human weapons at the same time. The ship that had destroyed over 100 worlds exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from the other side of the solar system. Admiral Krentok died, still believing that his empire was the strongest force in the galaxy. He never understood that the humans had technology that was impossible. The other Imperial ships tried to fight back, but their weapons could not hurt the human ships at all. Every time they fired, their energy was just absorbed by the human shields and made the human weapons more powerful. The Imperial captains started to panic because nothing they did was working. More Imperial ships exploded as the human fleet continued their attack. The space battle that the Empire thought would last 5 minutes had turned into a complete disaster for them. Captain Kim Dae-ho tried to retreat with his ship, Star Crusher, but the human ships were faster and caught up with him easily. His ship was destroyed by a single shot from a human weapon. Within 6 hours, every Imperial ship in the battle was destroyed. Not a single human ship had even been damaged. The message was very clear to anyone watching. Humanity had not come to the galaxy to make friends or negotiate. They had come to destroy the Empire completely. The age of Imperial power was about to end. The human fleet regrouped after the battle and prepared to move deeper into Imperial space. Admiral Lee Hana looked at the wreckage floating around them and thought about her brother who had died on New Busan. This was just the beginning. The Empire had killed millions of innocent people, and now they would pay the price for their crimes. The news of the Imperial fleet's complete destruction reached the capital planet within hours through quantum communication systems that could send messages faster than light. Emperor Takmor the Destroyer was sitting on his crystal throne when the report arrived. He had built his reputation by crushing rebellions before they could become dangerous. But these humans were different from anything he had faced before. The Emperor called for an emergency meeting of his war council in the great crystal chambers of the Imperial Palace Defense Minister. Cordon gathered the Empire's best military minds, including admirals who had won thousands of battles and generals who had conquered entire star systems. For 1,000 years, no enemy had ever defeated an Imperial fleet so completely. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the battle over and over again. The Imperial ships fired their most powerful weapons, and nothing happened to the human ships. Then the human ships fired back, and every Imperial vessel was destroyed in minutes. The military leaders watched in silence because they could not explain what they were seeing. General Vaktor had been fighting wars for the Empire for 400 years. He had seen seen every kind of weapon and every kind of ship that existed in the galaxy. But the human technology was impossible. Their shields should not work that way, and their weapons should not be that powerful. It was like the humans had found a way to break the laws of physics. Meanwhile, Captain Jiang Minsu was leading a squadron of human stealth ships through Imperial space. These ships were completely invisible to Imperial sensors, which meant the humans could go anywhere they wanted without being detected. The stealth ships were gathering information about Imperial defenses and finding out how big the Empire really was. What Captain Jiang discovered was shocking. The Empire controlled over 10,000 worlds and had millions of ships. The human fleet was much smaller, but their technology was so much better that it did not matter. The humans had quality, while the Empire only had quantity. This information was sent back to Admiral Li Hana, who began planning the next phase of the war. The Empire decided to respond with massive force. Admiral Vextar was put in command of a retaliatory strike against the human colony of New Sol. He had 2,000 ships under his command, including some of the Empire's most powerful battleships. The Emperor wanted to show these primitive humans what happened when someone challenged Imperial authority. The Imperial Armada traveled through hyperspace toward New Sol, expecting to find a defenseless human colony that they could destroy easily. But when they arrived, they found something that made them stop in shock. The planet was protected by massive orbital defense platforms that the humans had built in secret. Dr. Bei Yujin was watching from the command center on New Sol. As the Imperial fleet came out of hyperspace, she had helped design the orbital defense platforms, and she knew they were the most advanced defensive technology in the galaxy. Each platform could protect an entire continent and had weapons powerful enough to destroy a battleship with one shot. The Imperial fleet attacked the orbital platforms with everything they had. Thousands of energy beams struck the platforms, but they did not even scratch the surface. The human defensive shields were just as advanced as their ship shields, and they absorbed all the Imperial attacks easily. Then the platforms fired back. Admiral Vexitar watched in horror as his ships were destroyed by the hundreds. The orbital platforms had weapons that fired beams of pure energy that could cut through Imperial armor like it was paper. His flagship was hit and exploded immediately. The Admiral died, knowing that the Empire had made a terrible mistake by attacking humanity. The second defeat was even worse than the first, because now the Empire knew that humans were not just lucky. They had defensive technology that was just as impossible as their offensive weapons. The Empire's leaders began to realize that they were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. The panic spread through Imperial space as word of the second defeat reached other worlds. Species that had been conquered by the Empire started to whisper that maybe the Empire was not invincible after all. Some planets began to rebel, and the Empire had to send ships to stop the uprisings, but they needed those ships to fight the humans. Colonel Oh Tae-hyun stood in the landing bay of the assault ship, preparing for the first human ground attack on an Imperial world. The target was Kepler Prime, a fortress planet that had been the Empire's military headquarters for 300 years. The planet had millions of Imperial soldiers and weapons that could destroy entire cities, but the humans were not worried. The human soldiers were different from anything the Empire had seen before. Each soldier had been enhanced with nanotechnology that made them faster and stronger than any natural species. Their bones were reinforced with metal, their muscles were powered by artificial fibers, and their brains were connected to computer systems that let them think faster. When the human dropships landed on Kepler Prime, the Imperial defenders were ready for them. The planet had defense systems that had never been defeated, and soldiers who had trained their whole lives for war. But within minutes of the landing, the Imperial commanders realized they were facing something impossible. The human soldiers moved like they were all controlled by one mind. They attacked in perfect coordination, never making mistakes and never leaving anyone behind. When Imperial soldiers shot at them, the humans dodged the energy beams like they could see the future. Their return fire was so accurate that every shot destroyed an Imperial soldier. Lieutenant Park Sujin led her squad through the Imperial fortress that had been built into a mountain. The walls were made of the strongest metal in the galaxy, and the corridors were filled with automatic defense systems. But the human weapons cut through the metal walls like they were made of soft clay, and their armor protected them from the Imperial defenses. Battle for Kepler Prime lasted only 3 days. Imperial defenders who had held their positions for centuries were overwhelmed by human tactics they could not understand. The humans fought like they had studied every Imperial defense manual and knew exactly what the Empire would do before they did it. Admiral Lee. Hana walked through the ruins of the Imperial Command Center, looking at the tactical displays that showed the true scope of humanity's plan. This was not just revenge for New Busan. It was the systematic destruction of everything the Empire had built. The humans had spent 20 years preparing for this war, and every strategy had been designed for one purpose. General No Seungri was commanding human forces as they advanced through the core worlds. These were the Empire's most heavily defended star systems, with weapons platforms and fortress worlds that had never been defeated. But one by one they fell to the human advance. Each victory came faster than the last. The Imperial military leadership began to fall apart. Some admirals wanted to negotiate with the humans, while others demanded that the Empire fight to the last ship. But the humans were not interested in surrender or peace talks. They had come to deliver the same fate that the Empire had brought to countless other species. The Empire's soldiers had been trained to fight, using Imperial tactics against other Imperial forces. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that used completely different strategies. The human way of war was adaptive and flexible, while the Imperial way was rigid and predictable. This gave humanity a huge advantage in every battle. Captain Park Ji-yeon was intercepting Imperial communications from her reconnaissance ship, and what she heard made her smile. The Empire's leaders were finally beginning to understand the truth. Humanity was not just another species seeking revenge. They were an existential threat to everything the Empire had built over 1,000 years. The reports, coming from every battlefield, told the same story. Imperial forces were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Human technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic to the Empire's scientists and soldiers. The war that the Empire thought would be easy was turning into their worst nightmare. Some Imperial worlds began to surrender without fighting when they heard that human fleets were approaching. The species that the Empire had conquered for centuries started to rise up, in rebellion, knowing that their oppressors were finally being defeated. The Empire that had seemed eternal was crumbling from within and without. The siege of the Imperial core worlds began with humanity's most terrifying weapon. Stellar engineering Dr. Kim Yo-han had spent 15 years perfecting technology that could turn stars into weapons. When Imperial defenders gathered their fleets around their most important systems, humanity simply made the stars themselves become deadly. The first stellar manipulation happened in the Proxima system, where the Empire had built their largest shipyard. Commander Lee Jin-hyuk watched from the observation deck of his ship as the system's star began to pulse with unnatural energy. The star was being controlled by human technology in ways that should have been impossible. Within hours, massive solar flares erupted from the star with enough force to destroy every Imperial installation in the system. The Empire's greatest fortress and their most advanced shipyard became nothing but ash and melted metal floating in space. The star weapon was so powerful that it could destroy an entire solar system. The Imperial Navy was gathering for their final battle, but they had nowhere safe to retreat to because the humans could turn any star into a weapon. Emperor Thakmor himself took command of the Imperial fleet from his personal flagship. The Emperor had never personally led a battle before, but desperate times required desperate measures. The Emperor's fleet had 10,000 ships representing everything the Empire had left. These were the vessels that had conquered a galaxy and the warriors who had never known defeat. But they were about to face an enemy with technology so advanced that it seemed like the humans were gods of war. The final battle took place in orbit around the Imperial capital itself. Captain Han Ji-won led the human attack from the destroyer Final Justice. The Empire threw every weapon they had at the human fleet. Quantum torpedoes that could destroy planets, reality-warping devices that could change the laws of physics, time dilation fields that could slow down enemy ships. Nothing worked. The human ships passed through every Imperial attack without taking damage. Their adaptive technology could counter anything the Empire used against them. It was like watching children with sticks trying to fight against adults with machine guns. The outcome was never in doubt. Major Yang Su-young was leading human marines through the corridors of the imperial palace itself. These halls had been walked by emperors for 1,000 years, and no enemy had ever set foot inside the palace before. The Empire's elite guards were the best soldiers they had, but the human marines cut through them easily. Each room the humans captured brought them closer to the heart of imperial power. The throne room, where 100 emperors had ruled over 10,000 worlds, was now under attack by soldiers from a species the Empire had dismissed as primitive. The irony was not lost on the human commanders. The Emperor's last message was broadcast across the entire galaxy. It was a plea for mercy from the being who had shown no mercy to countless worlds. Emperor Thakmor begged the humans to spare the imperial capital and offered to surrender completely. But Admiral Li Hana's response was simple and cold. The humans would show the same mercy that the Empire had shown to New Busan. None at all. The imperial palace began to burn as human weapons tore through its crystal walls. The building that had been the symbol of galactic tyranny for a millennium was being reduced to rubble. Emperor Thakmor died in his throne room, still wearing his crown of stars, as human marines stormed through the doors. The last emperor of the galaxy's greatest empire was killed by soldiers from a species he had never bothered to learn about. The age of imperial rule was over forever. The destruction of the imperial capital was broadcast live across the galaxy. Every species that had lived under imperial oppression watched as the palace burned. Many of them cried with joy because they had never believed they would see this day. The empire that had seemed eternal was finally dead. Commander Park Ji-ho stood where the imperial throne had been, looking out through the broken crystal walls at the ruins of the galactic capital. The city that had ruled 10,000 worlds for 1,000 years was now nothing but smoking rubble and twisted metal. The empire that had seemed unbeatable was completely gone. The liberation fleets were already spreading across former imperial territory. Captain Lim Jinsol commanded forces moving through the outer rim, bringing freedom to species that had been slaves for generations. Many of these worlds had never imagined that the empire could be defeated. But humanity had made the impossible become reality. Admiral Li Hana was receiving reports from human commanders across the galaxy. Every imperial stronghold had been destroyed. Every fleet had been eliminated, and every symbol of imperial power had been erased from existence. The operation that began with revenge for New Busan had become something much greater. The complete liberation of galactic civilization had been achieved, but it came with a price that few understood. Dr. Choi Yansu was analyzing data from the stellar weapons, and she realized something terrible. The technology that had destroyed the Empire could never be used again safely. The damage to galactic stellar mechanics would take millions of years to heal. Humanity had saved the galaxy by almost destroying it. The stars themselves had been turned into weapons, and that had consequences that would affect every solar system for ages to come. But the other species of the galaxy did not care about stellar mechanics. They only cared that they were free. The species that had been conquered and enslaved by the Empire were celebrating in the streets of 10,000 worlds. Children who had been born into slavery would grow up free because humanity had given them that gift. The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity's fleets began to withdraw to their own space. The humans had proven they could destroy any enemy, conquer any world, and break any empire that had ever existed. Yet they chose to go home and leave the galaxy to govern itself. This confused many species because in their experience, whoever had the most power used it to rule over everyone else. But humanity was different. They had not come to conquer the galaxy. They had come to free it from tyranny. And once that job was done, they were ready to leave. Years passed, and historians from many different species began to study what had happened. They called it the Great Liberation because that was what it truly was. The Galactic Empire had ruled for 1,000 years through fear and violence, but it fell in less than 2 years to an enemy they had underestimated, the human. Ships had arrived without warning and left just as quietly, but the memory of what they had done would never be forgotten. Every species in the galaxy now knew that there were people out there who would fight for freedom, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The age of empires was over. replaced by something humanity had always believed in deeply: the right of all species to determine their own destiny. The stars themselves bore witness to humanity's message: those who spread destruction will face annihilation, but those who seek freedom will find it. Children across the galaxy would grow up hearing stories about the day the humans came and broke the chains that had bound their worlds for centuries. The Empire had thought humanity was weak and stupid, but they learned too late that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy when they fought for what was right. The galaxy was free, and humanity had shown that even the greatest evil could be defeated if good people were willing to fight for justice. The Imperial Empire was gone forever, and in its place was hope for a better future where no species would ever have to live in fear again.